Imagine walking into a government auction expecting to bid on old office furniture, only to discover that for the price of a fast food meal, you could own a piece of technology that would make the most powerful alien civilizations tremble with fear. What happens when humanity's greatest weakness, our tendency to buy random junk at bargain prices, becomes our most terrifying strength? This is the story of how $7.63 changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. It's about what happens when humans do what they do best: tinker with things they don't understand, refuse to follow the rules, and accidentally become the most feared species in known space. The Zephyrian Syndicate thought they knew everything about warfare, technology, and galactic dominance. They were wrong. They never counted on human curiosity, human stubbornness, and the terrifying ingenuity that emerges when someone tells a human something is impossible. Welcome to the day the galaxy learned why you should never, ever sell anything to humans at a discount. Marcus Chun had exactly $12.37 in his checking account when he stumbled into the government's surplus auction that Tuesday morning. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just killing time before his shift at the electronics repair shop. The coffee was free, the folding chairs were surprisingly comfortable, and watching people bid hundreds of dollars on rusted filing cabinets provided better entertainment than most television. The auctioneer, a tired-looking man in a wrinkled suit, had been droning through lot after lot of mundane government cast-offs. Office desks, broken computers, a suspicious amount of beige furniture from what appeared to be the 1970s. Marcus was considering leaving when the man announced Lot 247. Next up, we have an unidentified aircraft recovered from a crash site in Nevada, the auctioneer said, consulting his clipboard. Condition unknown, no documentation available. Military has cleared it for civilian auction. No warranty, no returns, sold as is. A grainy photograph appeared on the overhead screen, showing what looked like a metallic egg about the size of a small airplane hangar. The surface was smooth, almost mirror-like, with no visible seams, doors, or windows. It sat in what appeared to be a military storage facility, dwarfed by the concrete walls around it. Bidding starts at $5, the auctioneer continued. Marcus found himself raising his hand. He couldn't have explained why. Maybe it was the complete lack of interest from the other attendees, or maybe it was the way the object in the photograph seemed to shimmer despite the poor image quality. Something about it called to him. $5 to the gentleman in the blue jacket, the auctioneer called out, pointing at Marcus. Marcus waited for someone else to bid. The seconds ticked by. An elderly woman in the front row was examining a catalog of kitchen equipment from a decommissioned military base. A man in coveralls was making notes about a lot of surplus vehicles. Nobody else seemed to care about the mysterious aircraft. Going once, the auctioneer said with the enthusiasm of someone selling day-old bread. Going twice. Marcus realized with a mixture of excitement and horror that he was about to win. Sold for $5 to the gentleman in blue. 2 hours and $7.63 later, Marcus was the proud owner of an unidentified aircraft and a receipt that looked like it had been printed on a machine from 1982. The additional charges were for handling fees and documentation processing, which apparently consisted of a board clerk photocopying the same form 3 times. The real shock came when Marcus called the number on his receipt to arrange pickup. He'd expected to need a truck, maybe a trailer. Instead, the voice on the other end of the phone gave him coordinates to a military airfield 2 hours outside Las Vegas and told him his item would be ready for transport via a specialized heavy-lift helicopter. Marcus stared at his phone after the call ended. Heavy-lift helicopter? For $7.63? The flight to Nevada gave Marcus plenty of time to question his life choices. He'd used his credit card to book the last-minute ticket, pushing his debt even higher. His boss at the repair shop had been less than thrilled about the sudden request for time off. His girlfriend Sarah had listened to his explanation with the expression of someone watching a friend make spectacularly poor decisions. "You bought a what?" she'd said. "For how much?" "Marcus, you realize this is probably a scam, right?" "But The email confirmation from the military transport company seemed legitimate. The pilot who picked him up at the Nevada airfield was definitely real, a weathered man named Rodriguez who looked like he'd been flying helicopters since before Marcus was born. First time picking up surplus? Rodriguez asked as they lifted off. First time buying surplus, Marcus replied, watching the desert landscape roll past below them. Word of advice, Rodriguez said, adjusting his headset. Whatever you bought, don't try to understand it all at once. Government surplus is weird. Half the stuff they auction off, they don't even know what it is themselves. The storage facility appeared as a cluster of concrete buildings surrounded by chain-link fence and desert. Rodriguez set the helicopter down in a cloud of dust and sand, and Marcus climbed out to meet a small crew of workers who looked like they'd been waiting for hours. The crew chief, a woman with calloused hands and suspicious eyes, handed Marcus a clipboard thick with forms. Sign here, here, and here, she said. Initial there. Date there. You understand you're taking full responsibility for transport and disposal of this item. Marcus signed without reading. He was committed now, for better or worse. The aircraft sat in a warehouse that looked like it could house a commercial airliner. Up close, it was even stranger than the photograph had suggested. The surface wasn't just mirror smooth. It seemed to absorb and reflect light in ways that hurt to look at directly. The shape was definitely egg-like, but with subtle curves and indentations that suggested purpose rather than accident. How big is it? Marcus asked. 43 feet long, 28 feet wide, 18 feet tall, the crew chief replied. Weight is, well, that's the weird thing. According to our scales, it weighs about 1,200 pounds. But when we move it, it feels lighter. Sometimes a lot lighter. Marcus walked around the object slowly. There are no obvious doors, no windows, no engines or wings, or anything that looked like conventional aircraft technology. The surface was completely seamless, as if the entire thing had been carved from a single piece of metal. Any idea what it is? He asked. The crew chief shrugged. Above my pay grade. Crash investigation team spent 3 months on it. Couldn't find an opening, couldn't identify the materials, couldn't figure out how it worked. Finally, gave up and sent it to surplus. Your problem now. The transport process was surprisingly straightforward. The aircraft, despite its size, lifted easily with the helicopter's winch system. Rodriguez muttered something about the weight distribution being all wrong, but managed to flight back to Las Vegas without incident. Marcus had arranged to have his purchase delivered to a storage unit on the outskirts of town. It was the largest unit available, and watching the mysterious aircraft settle into the metal building felt surreal. He now owned something that had baffled military investigators, and he had no idea what to do with it. That night, Marcus sat in his small apartment researching everything he could find about unusual aircraft recoveries. The internet provided plenty of conspiracy theories, but few facts. Most of the legitimate sources he found were heavily redacted government documents that raised more questions than they answered. Sarah came over around 10, bringing Chinese takeout and her laptop. Okay, she said, settling onto his couch. Show me what you bought. Marcus pulled up the photos he'd taken at the storage facility. Sarah studied them with the analytical eye of someone who worked in aerospace engineering. The surface texture is completely wrong for anything human-made, she said after a few minutes. And these proportions, it's like someone took an aircraft and removed everything that makes it work. No intact, no exhaust, no control surfaces. The military couldn't figure it out either, Marcus said. Sarah zoomed in on one of the photos, focusing on a section where the lighting created subtle shadows. Wait, look at this. She pointed to what appeared to be a faint line running along the side of the aircraft, barely visible even in the enhanced image. That could be a seam, she said, or a panel line. It's very subtle, but it's there. Marcus leaned closer. Now that she'd pointed it out, he could see it too. A hairline division in the surface, so fine it was nearly invisible. There might be a way in, Sarah said. The military investigators would have found it. Maybe. Or maybe they weren't looking in the right way. Sarah closed her laptop and looked at Marcus seriously. You know this is crazy, right? You spent money you don't have on something that might be completely worthless. I know, but you're going to keep investigating anyway. Marcus nodded. I have to. There's something about it, Sarah. When I saw that photograph at the auction, it was like it was meant for me to find it. Sarah sighed, but she was smiling. Okay, but we do this scientifically. No wild theories, no jumping to conclusions. We document everything. The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work and drove to the storage unit. The aircraft looked exactly as he'd left it, sitting silently in the dim light filtering through the high windows. He'd brought a toolkit, a digital camera, and a notebook to record his observations. The first thing he noticed was the temperature. Despite the desert heat outside, the air around the aircraft felt cool. Not air-conditioned cool, but naturally cool, as if the object itself was somehow regulating the temperature. Marcus began a systematic examination, starting with the base where the aircraft touched the ground. The surface here was identical to everywhere else, perfectly smooth and seamless. But when he placed his hand against it, the metal felt warm despite the cool air around it. As he worked his way around the perimeter, Marcus noticed that the nearly invisible seam Sarah had spotted in the photograph was actually part of a larger pattern. Faint lines, barely perceptible, traced geometric shapes across the surface. Some formed rectangles that could be panels. Others created more complex patterns that seemed to serve no obvious purpose. It was when Marcus reached what he thought might be the front of the aircraft that he made his first real discovery. A section of the surface that looked identical to everything else felt different under his palm, slightly warmer, with a texture that was almost organic. As he pressed more firmly, the section began to glow. Marcus jerked his hand back, heart pounding. The glow faded immediately, leaving the surface looking normal. He stood there for several minutes, wondering if he'd imagined it. Cautiously, he placed his palm against the same spot again. This time, the glow was unmistakable. A soft blue light spread out from under his hand, following the faint lines he'd noticed earlier. The lines formed a pattern that looked almost like a handprint, but with too many fingers and proportions that were subtly wrong for human anatomy. The glow intensified, and Marcus heard something he hadn't noticed before. A low humming sound, barely audible, coming from inside the aircraft. As he watched, fascinated and terrified in equal measure, a section of the surface began to iris open like an eye. The opening was circular, about 3 feet in diameter, revealing a soft blue light from within. Marcus found himself looking into what was unmistakably the interior of a spacecraft. The walls inside curved smoothly away from the opening, lined with surfaces that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. Strange symbols were etched into panels that seemed to float without visible support. The air that drifted out carried scents Marcus couldn't identify, clean and metallic, but with an undertone of something organic. From where he stood, Marcus could see what looked like a control area. Curved surfaces that might be seats faced a wall covered with symbols and shapes that shifted and changed as he watched. Everything was sized for beings roughly human-shaped, but clearly not human. Marcus realized he was holding his breath. He forced himself to breathe normally, to think clearly despite the impossibility of what he was seeing. He had bought a genuine alien spacecraft for $7.63, and now it was open, waiting for him to enter. The smart thing would be to back away, close the opening somehow, and contact the authorities. This was clearly beyond anything one person should handle alone. But as Marcus stood at the threshold of the impossible, he realized that calling the government would mean losing the greatest discovery in human history. He thought about the auction, about how casually the auctioneer had described the unidentified aircraft. He thought about the military investigators who had spent months trying to open it and failed. Somehow, it had responded to his touch when it wouldn't respond to theirs. Maybe that meant something. Maybe it had been waiting for him specifically. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Sarah. "I need you to come to the storage unit," he said. "Right now. And bring your video camera. Did you find something?" "I found everything." An hour later, Sarah stood beside Marcus, staring at the open spacecraft with an expression of absolute disbelief. "This is not possible," she whispered. "I know. This cannot be real. I know. We have to document this. Everything. Every detail." Sarah raised her camera with shaking hands. "Before we do anything else, we record everything we see." For the next 2 hours, they photographed and filmed every visible surface of the spacecraft's interior from outside. The symbols on the control surfaces continued to shift and change as if responding to their presence. The blue bioluminescence pulsed in slow, steady rhythms that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of a heartbeat. "We have to go inside," Sarah said finally. "Do we?" "Marcus, this could change everything we know about physics, about space travel, about life in the universe. We can't just look at it from the doorway." Marcus knew she was right, but the implications were staggering. There were 2 ordinary people who had stumbled onto something that governments would kill for. Every step they took deeper into this mystery would make them bigger targets. On the other hand, they had already crossed the line from curious civilians to people who know too much. There was no going back to normal life. "Together," Marcus said. "We go in together, we stay together, and at the first sign of anything dangerous, we get out." Sarah nodded. Together. They climbed through the circular opening into the alien spacecraft. The interior was larger than the exterior should have allowed. Marcus found himself in a space that felt like a small apartment rather than the cramped cockpit he'd expected. The walls curved gracefully around them, lined with panels that glowed with soft, shifting colors. The floor felt solid but gave slightly under their feet, like walking on very thick carpet. The control area dominated the front of the space. 3 seats faced a curved wall covered with symbols, shapes, and what appeared to be 3-dimensional displays. The seats were clearly designed for beings with longer torsos and shorter legs than humans, but they weren't uncomfortable. "Look at this," Sarah whispered, pointing to one of the displays. The display showed what appeared to be a map of local star systems, with lines connecting various points. Earth's solar system was marked with a pulsing red symbol. Other systems showed different colors, and the connecting lines seemed to indicate travel routes. "It's a navigation system," Marcus realized. As if responding to his words, the display zoomed in on Earth's solar system. The view showed not just the planets, but detailed information about each one. Earth appeared with additional symbols and data that Marcus couldn't read, but could somehow sense were important. "The ship is analyzing our solar system," Sarah said. "It's been studying us." Another display activated, showing what appeared to be historical information. Images flashed past too quickly to follow in detail, but Marcus caught glimpses of alien cities, massive space structures, and what looked like star maps spanning incredible distances. Then, the images changed, showing scenes that made Marcus's blood run cold. Fleets of ships that dwarfed anything in human imagination. Planets being strip-mined by machines the size of mountains. Entire solar systems going dark as their stars were harvested for energy. And through it all, one consistent symbol appeared over and over. A stylized representation of 3 interlocking spirals, rendered in silver and black. "That's a military insignia," Sarah said quietly. "Or maybe a government symbol." The displays showed more scenes of destruction, always accompanied by the 3-spiral symbol. Civilizations that spanned multiple worlds reduced to debris fields. Entire species extinct, their planets left as barren rocks floating in space. "This ship," Marcus said slowly, "it's not from some peaceful exploration mission." As if responding to his words, the displays changed again. Now they showed technical specifications, weapons systems that Marcus couldn't understand but could recognize as incredibly destructive. The ship they were sitting in was not just a spacecraft. It was a weapon more powerful than anything humanity had ever imagined. And, according to the displays, it belonged to something called the Zephyrian Syndicate. The 3-spiral symbol appeared on every technical schematic, every command interface, every weapon system. This was a Syndicate ship, and the Syndicate appeared to be responsible for the systematic destruction of every advanced civilization they encountered. "We have to leave," Sarah said. "Right now. We have to get out of here and figure out what to do." But, as she spoke, the circular opening behind them began to iris closed. Marcus lunged for the shrinking exit, but his fingers found only smooth metal. The opening sealed with a soft whisper, leaving them trapped inside the alien weapon. The displays around them flashed with new information. Symbols that might have been text scrolled past, too fast to read, even if they'd understood the language. The ship's systems were activating, responding to their presence in ways that felt decidedly unfriendly. A new sound filled the air, a deep thrumming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The bioluminescent panels began pulsing faster, and Marcus could swear he felt the ship moving despite the fact that they were inside a storage unit. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "I think we just activated something we shouldn't have." The displays showed a countdown timer, symbols decreasing in a pattern that was unmistakably counting down to 0. They had no idea what would happen when it reached 0, but every instinct screamed that they didn't want to find out. Marcus looked at the control panels, at the alien symbols and shifting displays, and realized that their $7 purchase had just become the most dangerous thing on Earth. The countdown reached 0, and Marcus braced for catastrophe. Instead, the thrumming sound stopped, the pulsing lights stabilized, and new displays materialized in the air around them. These weren't the harsh military schematics they'd seen before. These looked almost welcoming. A three-dimensional image appeared in the center of the control area, showing two human figures, clearly meant to represent Marcus and Sarah, standing inside the spacecraft. Text in what appeared to be multiple languages scrolled beneath the image, cycling through scripts Marcus didn't recognize until suddenly, impossibly, English appeared. "Welcome, authorized users. Initiating cultural integration protocol." Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm. "It's learning English. From us. Right now." The display continued. Biometric analysis complete. Species designation, human. Origin world, Earth Sol System. Security clearance, pending evaluation. Marcus stared at the floating text. Security clearance? New images appeared, showing the ship's journey to Earth. Marcus watched in fascination as the displays revealed the craft's story. It had been part of a Zephyrian Syndicate patrol fleet, investigating reports of a developing civilization in the Sol System. But something had gone wrong during the mission. The images showed the ship breaking away from its fleet, its pilot apparently rebelling against orders to begin the systematic destruction of human civilization. The craft had crashed deliberately in Nevada's desert, its pilot activating some kind of self-sacrifice protocol to prevent the ship's weapons from being used against Earth. "The pilot saved us," Sarah whispered. "It crashed here on purpose to keep the Syndicate from destroying humanity." But the display wasn't finished. New text appeared, pilot's final command. Preserve ship's capabilities for eventual human acquisition. Authorization required for weapons systems activation. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The alien pilot hadn't just crashed to save Earth. It had deliberately designed the ship's systems to recognize and respond to humans, betting that eventually someone would find the craft and unlock its secrets. "It was waiting for us," Marcus said. "Not us specifically, but humans. It wanted humans to find this ship." Sarah was studying the technical displays that had appeared around them. "Marcus, look at this. The ship's not just a weapon. It's a library." The pilot copied every piece of information it had access to from Syndicate databases. She was right. The displays showed vast archives of technical specifications, star charts, cultural databases, and what appeared to be detailed intelligence on Syndicate operations throughout the galaxy. Information that would be invaluable to any civilization trying to defend itself against Syndicate expansion. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked the ship's computer. New text appeared. Syndicate follow-up investigation delayed due to pilot's deception protocols. Estimated arrival of Syndicate forces, 847 Earth days. Marcus did quick math. Less than 2.5 years. Probability of human civilization survival without intervention, 0.0003 3%. Sarah sank into one of the alien seats. We're talking about the survival of the entire human race. And somehow it's ended up being our responsibility. Marcus looked around at the incredible technology surrounding them. The ship's systems were more advanced than anything humanity had dreamed of, but they were also completely alien. Even with the cultural integration protocol making the interfaces more human-friendly, learning to operate a Zephyrian warship would take time they didn't have. Can the ship teach us how to use its systems? Marcus asked. Affirmative. Cultural integration protocol includes comprehensive training modules. Warning: full systems mastery typically requires 4.7 years of intensive study. We don't have 4 years, Sarah said. Alternative approach available. Accelerated neural integration. Warning: process is painful and may cause psychological integration issues. Marcus and Sarah looked at each other. Neural integration sounded terrifying, but if it was the only way to master the ship's systems before the Syndicate arrived, they might not have a choice. What exactly does neural integration involve? Sarah asked. The displays changed, showing detailed medical scans of human brain structures alongside alien equivalents. Procedure involves temporary neural linking with ship's computer systems. User consciousness temporarily merges with ship's database. Knowledge transfer is direct and immediate. Side effects may include temporary disorientation, memory integration issues, and personality drift. Personality drift? Marcus didn't like the sound of that. Users' thought patterns may temporarily adopt characteristics of original Zephyrian pilot. Effect is usually temporary, but can persist in rare cases. Sarah stood up, pacing around the small control area. So we're talking about temporarily becoming part alien in our thinking patterns. In exchange for learning how to operate a starship, that's probably our only hope of surviving first contact with a genocidal alien empire. Put like that, the choice seemed obvious. But Marcus found himself hesitating. They were talking about fundamentally altering their minds, taking on alien memories and thought patterns. Even temporarily, it would change who they were. There has to be another way, Marcus said. Alternative approaches available, but significantly less effective. Standard training protocol would provide basic systems operation capability in approximately 18 months. Probability of success against Syndicate forces, 12%. And with neural integration, full systems integration achievable in 72 hours. Probability of success against Syndicate forces, 34%. Marcus looked at Sarah. 34% wasn't great odds, but it was better than 12%. And both options assumed they were the only humans who would have access to the ship's technology. What if we could train other people? Marcus asked. Military pilots, engineers, scientists? Negative. Ship's security systems will only recognize individuals present during initial activation. Additional users cannot be added without Syndicate command authorization. Sarah stopped pacing. So it's just us. 2 people with no military training, no aerospace experience, and no idea what we're doing against an alien empire that's apparently conquered most of the galaxy. The weight of responsibility was crushing. Marcus had bought what he thought was an interesting piece of surplus equipment, and now the survival of human civilization rested on his and Sarah's shoulders. There's something else we need to consider, Sarah said quietly. If we go through with this, if we use neural integration to learn how to operate this ship, we stop being normal humans. Even temporarily, we become something else. Marcus nodded. He'd been thinking the same thing. Once they merged their consciousness with the ship's systems, once they took on the memories and knowledge of an alien pilot, there would be no going back to their old lives. Even if the personality changes were temporary, they would know things no human was meant to know. But the alternative was the extinction of their entire species. We have to do it, Marcus said. We don't have a choice. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Together. The ship's systems responded to their decision immediately. New displays appeared, showing preparation procedures for neural integration. Medical scanners emerged from hidden panels in the walls, beginning comprehensive analysis of their brain structures and nervous systems. Integration chamber activating. Please remain calm during preparation phase. The floor in the center of the control area opened, revealing a chamber lined with what looked like organic technology. Two reclining surfaces extended upward, surrounded by delicate tendrils that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. Marcus had seen enough science fiction movies to know that getting into an alien device designed to mess with your brain was usually a bad idea. But he also knew that they were far past the point of making safe choices. Preparation complete. Neural integration will begin when both users are in position. Estimated duration, 71 hours, 14 minutes. Marcus climbed into the integration chamber, settling onto the surface that molded itself to his body. The material felt warm and slightly organic, like sitting on something that was almost alive. Sarah took the position beside him, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "See you on the other side," she said. The bioluminescent tendrils began to move, extending toward their heads with movements that were disturbingly graceful. Marcus felt a moment of panic as the alien technology touched his temples, but the contact was surprisingly gentle. Neural integration beginning. Prepare for consciousness expansion. The world dissolved. Marcus found himself floating in a space that wasn't space, surrounded by information that existed as pure concept rather than words or images. He was still himself, but he was also more than himself. Sarah was there too, her consciousness recognizable, but somehow expanded, touching minds with his in ways that felt more intimate than anything physical. And there was a third presence in the shared mental space. The Zephyrian pilot who had sacrificed its life to bring this ship to Earth. The pilot's name was something that couldn't be pronounced with human vocal cords, but Marcus understood it as a concept meaning bridge builder between stars. Its memories flowed into Marcus's consciousness like a vast river of experience. Marcus saw the Zephyrian Syndicate from the inside, understanding their culture in ways no external observer could. The Syndicate wasn't just an empire. It was a machine designed for the systematic harvesting of resources from younger civilizations. They had perfected the art of conquest not through superior force alone, but through predictable patterns of development that let them arrive at precisely the right moment to capture a civilization's resources with minimal resistance. Every species followed similar patterns of technological development. First came basic space flight, then interplanetary expansion, then the first tentative steps toward faster-than-light travel. The Syndicate monitored thousands of developing civilizations, waiting for each to reach the optimal point for harvesting. Earth had reached that point, but Bridge Builder Between Stars had seen something in humanity that made it break from Syndicate protocol. Marcus experienced the pilot's memories of observing Earth, studying human behavior patterns, and reaching a conclusion that had led to its betrayal of its own species. Humans were unpredictable in ways that broke the Syndicate's models. Other species developed logically, following paths that could be predicted and exploited. Humans developed chaotically, making leaps of intuition that bypassed normal technological progression. More importantly, humans had a tendency to refuse to follow rules they didn't agree with, even when those rules came from superior forces. The Syndicate's entire system of conquest depended on species behaving predictably. When faced with superior technology and overwhelming force, civilizations were supposed to surrender and accept integration into the Syndicate's resource extraction network. Bridge Builder Between Stars had studied human history and realized that humans would never cooperate with their own extinction. They would fight, even against impossible odds. They would find ways to turn their weaknesses into strengths. They would refuse to be logical about their survival. That unpredictability, the pilot had concluded, made humanity the Syndicate's greatest potential threat. Marcus felt Sarah's consciousness alongside his own as she absorbed the same revelations. Together, they learned about Syndicate technology, military tactics, and the network of colonies and resource extraction operations that spanned dozens of star systems. They learned about the Syndicate's one crucial weakness: their dependence on predictable patterns. Every Syndicate system was designed around the assumption that they faced logical, predictable opponents. Their ships, their weapons, their tactics, all optimized for fighting enemies who followed expected patterns of behavior. Marcus understood now why Bridge Builder Between Stars had deliberately crashed on Earth rather than completing its mission. The pilot hadn't just been saving humanity from immediate destruction. It had been giving them the tools they would need to do something no other species had ever accomplished: defeat the Syndicate through sheer, bloody-minded human stubbornness. Knowledge flowed through the neural link faster than conscious thought. Marcus learned to operate the ship's systems as if he'd been born to them. He understood the weapons, the navigation systems, the faster-than-light drive that could cross interstellar distances in hours rather than years. But more than technical knowledge, Marcus gained something that would prove far more valuable. He learned to think like a Zephyrian while remaining fundamentally human. The integration process took 3 days of real time, but Marcus experienced it as months of intensive education. When consciousness finally returned to his individual body, he found himself changed in ways that were difficult to articulate. Sarah opened her eyes at the same moment he did, and Marcus could see the same transformation in her expression. She looked like Sarah, sounded like Sarah, but there was something new in her eyes, a depth of understanding that hadn't been there before. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Different," Sarah replied. "Like I'm still me, but I'm also carrying someone else's lifetime of experiences." Marcus knew exactly what she meant. Bridge Builder Between Stars wasn't controlling his thoughts, but the pilot's memories and knowledge were now part of him. He could access technical information about systems no human had ever seen, understand alien languages as if he'd grown up speaking them, and think tactically about space combat despite having never left Earth's atmosphere. "Neural integration complete," the ship announced. All systems now available to authorized users. The displays around them had changed during the integration process. Where before the interfaces had looked alien and intimidating, now they felt as familiar as driving a car. Marcus understood intuitively how to operate every system, from basic navigation to the terrifyingly powerful weapons arrays. "We need to test the ship," Sarah said. "We need to know that we can actually operate it before the Syndicate arrives." Marcus nodded, but he was already thinking beyond basic operation. The knowledge he'd gained from Bridge Builder Between Stars included detailed intelligence about Syndicate fleet compositions, tactics, and technology. With that information, they could do more than just run and hide when the invasion fleet arrived. They could fight back. "Sarah," Marcus said slowly, "what if we don't wait for them to come to us?" She looked at him with understanding that came partly from her own new knowledge and partly from the mental connection they'd shared during integration. "You want to take the fight to them." "Bridge Builder Between Stars gave us more than a ship," Marcus said. "It gave us detailed intelligence on Syndicate operations throughout this sector of the galaxy. We know where their bases are, how their supply lines work, what their weaknesses are." Sarah was quiet for a moment, accessing memories that weren't originally hers. The Syndicate rules through overwhelming technological superiority. They've never faced an enemy that could match their capabilities. But we can match them now. This ship is as advanced as anything in their fleet. One ship against an empire. Marcus smiled, and there's something in that smile that would have terrified the Syndicate if they could have seen it. It was a uniquely human expression, mixing determination with the kind of cheerful insanity that had led humans to charge machine gun nests and explore polar regions. One ship operated by humans, Marcus corrected. Bridge Builder Between Stars chose us specifically because we're unpredictable. We don't follow the rules. We don't do what we're supposed to do. Sarah's own smile matched his. "We improvise." The ship's systems came alive around them as they began planning their first strike. The Syndicate expected Earth to be an easy conquest, another predictable species following predictable patterns. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest weakness, their tendency to make decisions that seemed completely insane to logical minds, was also their greatest strength. Marcus and Sarah had spent $7.63 on a Starship. Now they were going to use it to declare war on the galaxy. 6 weeks after the neural integration, Marcus and Sarah had transformed from ordinary humans into something the galaxy had never seen before. Humans with access to advanced alien technology and the stubborn refusal to use it sensibly. Their first target was a Syndicate mining operation in the Proxima Centauri system, chosen specifically because it represented everything wrong with Syndicate philosophy. According to Bridge Builder Between Stars' memories, the operation had strip-mined 3 inhabited worlds, relocating the native populations to resource optimization centers that were essentially concentration camps with better marketing. The journey to Proxima Centauri took 18 hours using the ship's faster-than-light drive, a technology that folded space-time in ways that made Marcus's head hurt when he thought about it too directly. Sarah handled the technical aspects of navigation, while Marcus focused on tactical planning, both drawing on alien knowledge that felt simultaneously foreign and natural. Syndicate doctrine calls for overwhelming force applied with mathematical precision, Marcus said as they approached the target system. They calculate exactly how much firepower is needed to achieve their objectives and apply that force efficiently. So they're not expecting someone to show up and start a fight they can't win, Sarah replied, studying the sensor readings. They're expecting logical opponents who retreat when faced with superior numbers. The Proxima Centauri system was a testament to Syndicate efficiency. What had once been a star system with 4 planets was now a carefully organized industrial complex. 3 worlds had been completely mined out, reduced to hollow shells that served as storage facilities. The 4th planet had been converted into a massive refinery, its atmosphere thick with the byproducts of processing operations. 17 Syndicate vessels orbited the refinery planet, ranging from small patrol ships to a massive harvester that was easily 10 times the size of their captured ship. According to normal military logic, Marcus and Sarah should have retreated immediately and looked for an easier target. Instead, Marcus opened a communication channel to the Syndicate fleet. "Attention Syndicate forces," he broadcast on all frequencies. "This is the human vessel." He looked at Sarah. They'd never actually named their ship. "Spite," Sarah said without hesitation. "The human vessel Spite." Marcus grinned. The name was perfect. "This is the human vessel Spite. You are ordered to cease mining operations immediately and begin evacuation procedures for all imprisoned populations." The response came within minutes, transmitted from the largest Syndicate vessel in a tone that conveyed amused condescension even across species barriers. "Unknown vessel, you're operating stolen Syndicate technology. Return to designated coordinates for processing. Compliance will result in efficient termination. Resistance will result in extended termination." Sarah checked their weapons systems one final time. The ship's arsenal included energy weapons that could crack planets and defensive systems that could withstand direct hits from stellar-class weapons. More importantly, they included targeting systems that were designed by minds that thought in 3-dimensional space rather than the flat tactical thinking that dominated human military doctrine. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, "we're about to start an interstellar war with 2 people and a ship we've known how to operate for less than 2 months. Yes, the smart thing to do would be to retreat, go back to Earth, and try to prepare some kind of defense. Yes, but we're not going to do that. No." Sarah's smile was equal parts terrified and exhilarated. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." The first Syndicate patrol ship to approach them was roughly the size of a large commercial airliner. Its weapons systems powered up as it closed to what its pilot obviously considered a safe engagement range. The pilot was thinking in terms of standard Syndicate tactics: close to optimal range, apply precise amounts of force, achieve objectives with minimal resource expenditure. It was logical, efficient, and completely wrong for fighting humans. Marcus waited until the patrol ship was committed to its approach vector, then did something no Syndicate pilot would expect. He accelerated directly toward the enemy ship while simultaneously rotating their vessel to present the smallest possible target profile. The maneuver was completely insane by Syndicate standards. Marcus was flying directly into enemy fire, abandoning all defensive positioning in favor of an aggressive approach that should have resulted in immediate destruction. Instead, it resulted in the patrol ship's pilot making a critical error. Faced with an opponent who wasn't following expected behavioral patterns, the Syndicate pilot hesitated for just a moment, trying to recalculate optimal firing solutions for a target that was doing something no rational opponent would do. That moment of hesitation was all Marcus needed. The Spite's main weapons system discharged, sending a lance of coherent energy through the patrol ship's center mass. The Syndicate vessel simply ceased to exist, vaporized so quickly that its destruction barely registered on sensors. "One down," Marcus said calmly. 16 to go. The rest of the Syndicate fleet responded exactly as Bridge Builder Between Stars' memories had predicted. They formed efficient attack formations, calculated optimal firing patterns, and began a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm their opponents through superior numbers and firepower. It was a textbook Syndicate response, which meant it was exactly what Marcus and Sarah were prepared for. Sarah engaged the ship's defensive systems while simultaneously plotting an escape route that would take them through the middle of the enemy formation. The route looked suicidal, which was exactly why it would work. No rational opponent would fly directly into the center of 17 enemy ships. Humans, however, were not rational opponents. The Spite carved through the Syndicate formation like a blade through silk. Sarah's piloting combined alien technology with human intuition, pulling maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible even with advanced physics. She flew like someone who had learned to drive in city traffic and then been given access to a Formula One racing car. Meanwhile, Marcus operated the weapons systems with the focused intensity of someone playing a video game where losing meant the extinction of a species. He targeted engines, weapon systems, and command centers with precision that came from alien knowledge filtered through human aggression. The Syndicate ships found themselves fighting an opponent that refused to behave logically. Instead of retreating when faced with superior numbers, the Spite attacked. Instead of focusing on survival, it prioritized maximum damage to enemy forces. Instead of following predictable engagement patterns, it seemed to make tactical decisions based on what would cause the most chaos. Within 20 minutes, 12 of the 17 Syndicate ships had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 5 vessels attempted to retreat, which was when Sarah demonstrated another uniquely human characteristic, vindictiveness. Rather than allowing the survivors to escape and report back to Syndicate Command, Sarah pursued them individually, hunting down each ship with a methodical determination of someone settling a personal score. Marcus provided targeting solutions and weapon control, turning the retreat into a systematic elimination of witnesses. When the last Syndicate ship was reduced to debris, Marcus and Sarah found themselves alone in a star system that had been under alien control for decades. "Now what?" Sarah asked. Marcus was already accessing the ship's databases, searching for information about the imprisoned populations on the refinery planet. "Now we do something the Syndicate has never seen before. We rescue people." The refinery planet held approximately 40,000 beings from 12 different species, all of them kept in facilities designed for maximum efficiency rather than habitability. The rescue operation took 6 days and required Marcus and Sarah to become experts in alien biochemistry, atmospheric requirements, and interspecies psychology. It was complicated, exhausting work that no military force would have attempted with only 2 people. But Marcus and Sarah weren't a military force. They were humans with access to alien technology and the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. They liberated entire populations by simply ignoring the logistical problems that should have made such an operation impossible. When they ran out of space in their ship, they commandeered Syndicate transport vessels. When they encountered species with incompatible atmospheric requirements, they retrofitted captured Syndicate equipment to create temporary habitats. Most importantly, they did it all while maintaining constant communication with the rescued populations, explaining who they were and what they were trying to accomplish. "We're humans from Earth," Marcus told the various species they encountered. "The Syndicate was planning to do to our world what they did to yours. We decided to object." The rescued population's reactions varied wildly. Some species were grateful, but confused by the concept of self-sacrifice for strangers. Others were suspicious of any beings operating Syndicate technology. But all of them were fascinated by the idea of a species that would deliberately start a war they couldn't win rather than accept their own extinction. Sarah found herself serving as an impromptu diplomat, using Bridge Builder Between Stars as cultural knowledge to communicate with dozens of different species. Her conversations revealed just how unprecedented their actions were. "No species has ever successfully resisted Syndicate expansion," explained a rescued being whose name roughly translated to Keeper of Ancient Songs. "The mathematics of conquest are too precise. The Syndicate always applies exactly sufficient force to achieve their objectives. But they've never fought humans before," Sarah pointed out. "What makes humans different?" Sarah considered the question. "We're bad at math." It was a flippant answer, but it contained a kernel of truth that would prove crucial in the months to come. Humans were uniquely bad at accepting mathematical realities when those realities conflicted with their emotional convictions. By the time the rescue operation was complete, word of the attack had spread throughout the local region of space. The Syndicate's response was swift and predictable. They dispatched a task force of 30 ships to investigate the loss of their mining operation and eliminate the unknown threat. Marcus and Sarah could have escaped easily, taking their rescued populations to safe systems far from Syndicate space. It would have been the smart tactical decision, preserving their resources for future operations while avoiding unnecessary risks. Instead, they decided to stay and fight. "They're sending 30 ships," Sarah reported, studying the long-range sensor readings, including 2 heavy cruisers and a command vessel. Marcus was reviewing tactical data from Bridge Builder Between Stars' memories. "Standard Syndicate doctrine for dealing with unknown threats. Apply overwhelming force, analyze the wreckage, adjust protocols as necessary." "We can't fight 30 ships." "No," Marcus agreed. "We can't fight 30 ships using Syndicate tactics." He turned to look at the rescued populations they'd transported to temporary facilities on the outer planets of the system. 40,000 beings from 12 different species, all of whom had been written off as acceptable losses in the Syndicate's expansion plan. "But we're not using Syndicate tactics," Marcus continued. "We're using human tactics." Sarah followed his gaze. "You want to turn the rescued populations into allies. I want to give them the choice to fight back." Over the following week, Marcus and Sarah did something that no civilization in recorded galactic history had ever attempted. They organized a multi-species resistance movement based on the radical premise that beings had the right to refuse their own extinction. Using captured Syndicate equipment and the technical knowledge they'd gained from neural integration, they began retrofitting civilian vessels with military capabilities. They taught basic combat tactics to species that had never considered organized resistance. Most importantly, they shared the fundamental human concept that sometimes fighting a war you can't win is more important than survival. The resistance movement that emerged was chaotic, inefficient, and completely insane by any rational standard. Ships designed for cargo transport found themselves mounting weapon systems. Beings whose species had never developed military technology learned to operate targeting systems and coordinate fleet movements. It was, in every measurable way, a disaster waiting to happen. When the Syndicate task force arrived, they found themselves facing not one stolen ship operated by unknown aliens, but a fleet of 43 vessels crewed by representatives of 12 different species, all of whom had decided that dying in battle was preferable to living in captivity. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for generations, assuming there were any military historians left alive after humanity finished rewriting the rules of galactic warfare. The Syndicate fleet approached with textbook precision, calculating optimal firing solutions, and target priorities based on standard fleet engagement protocols. Their commanders expected to face an organized resistance movement led by experienced military personnel operating according to established tactical doctrines. Instead, they faced 43 ships operated by civilians who had been told that their job was to cause as much chaos as possible before dying gloriously in battle. The resulting fight looked less like a space battle and more like a bar brawl involving starships. The liberated populations flew their improvised warships with the desperate creativity of beings who had nothing left to lose. They used cargo containers as kinetic weapons, turned mining equipment into improvised mass drivers, and coordinated attacks through a communications network that operated in 12 different languages simultaneously. In the middle of it all, Marcus and Sarah piloted the spite with the focused aggression of two people who had decided that the Syndicate's mathematical approach to conquest was personally offensive. The battle lasted 14 hours and resulted in the complete destruction of the Syndicate task force. More importantly, it established a precedent that would echo throughout the galaxy. The Syndicate could be beaten by opponents who refused to follow the rules. In the aftermath, as they salvaged technology and resources from the wreckage of 30 Syndicate warships, Marcus realized that they had crossed a line from which there was no return. They were no longer just trying to save Earth. They had declared war on the fundamental principles that govern galactic civilization. What happens now? Sarah asked as they watched the liberated populations celebrate their first military victory in living memory. Marcus looked at the star charts showing Syndicate territories throughout the local region of space. Hundreds of systems, thousands of worlds, billions of enslaved beings, all controlled by an empire that had never faced serious resistance. Now we teach the galaxy something new, Marcus said. We teach them how to say no. The Spite and its growing fleet of allies began moving toward their next target, carrying with them the most dangerous idea the galaxy had ever encountered: that sometimes the right thing to do was also the impossible thing to do. Behind them, the liberated populations began sending messages to other enslaved worlds, spreading the radical notion that resistance was possible. The Syndicate, meanwhile, began receiving reports that didn't match any of their predictive models. An unknown species had somehow organized successful resistance movements using tactics that made no mathematical sense. Their military analysts struggled to understand how beings operating inferior technology could defeat superior forces through what appeared to be organized chaos. They were about to learn that humans had a gift for making chaos work in their favor, and that gift was about to reshape the galaxy.